Imagine running a marathon. You cross the finish line, legs burning, chest heaving. You are utterly depleted. Now imagine a doctor walks up to you, takes your blood pressure, checks your heart rate, and says, well, on paper, you look fine. You should be ready to run another one right now. That disconnect between the biological reality of exhaustion and the clinical data on a chart is where we're living today. We are talking about adrenal insufficiency, and not just the textbook definition, but the invisible gap between adequate lab numbers and the actual lived experience of surviving without a stress response system. I'm Noah, and this is a look at what happens when the body's engine is running on fumes, but the gauges say full tank.
It's a terrifying analogy, Noah. But for thousands of people, it's not an analogy. It's Tuesday. And the problem is exactly what you identified, the difference between a static number and a dynamic life.
Right, so let's ground this before we get too abstract. We are looking at a condition where the body essentially loses its ability to produce cortisol. Most people hear cortisol and think stress hormone bad. We see ads for supplements to lower cortisol. But if you don't have it, you die. That's the stakes here, correct?
That is exactly the stakes. Cortisol is the currency of survival. It regulates blood pressure, blood sugar, immune function, and metabolism. In a healthy person, it's part of the HPA axis, hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis. It's a feedback loop. Your brain senses stress, signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenals, to release fuel. In AI or adrenal insufficiency, that line is cut. The fuel doesn't come.
And there are different flavors of this, right? It's not just one thing.
Correct. You have primary AI, often called Addison's disease, where the adrenal glands themselves are damaged, usually autoimmune. Then you have secondary and tertiary AI, which are signaling problems in the brain, often from pituitary issues or long-term steroid use. But regardless of the type, the result is the same: a cortisol deficit.
Okay, so here is the central tension of this episode, and it's something that the My Adrenal Life community highlights constantly. A patient goes to the endocrinologist, they get blood drawn, the doctor looks at the results and says, great news, your replacement medication is working, your numbers are in range. But the patient feels like they've been hit by a truck. Why is medicine missing this?
Because medicine is often looking at a photograph when they should be watching a movie. We call this the snapshot problem. Standard lab tests measure hormone levels at a single specific moment, usually 8 a.m. But cortisol isn't static. In a healthy body, it has a circadian rhythm. It spikes in the morning to wake you up and slowly tapers off. Plus, and this is key, it spikes on demand. If you almost get hit by a car, your cortisol surges instantly. If you get the flu, it surges to keep you alive. A morning blood draw tells you nothing about that dynamic capacity.
So it's like checking the gas gauge in a parked car and assuming the car can drive 500 miles at high speed.
Precisely. The lab result says you have gas in the tank right now. It doesn't say your fuel pump is broken and you can't accelerate if you need to pass someone. The daily replacement steroids, hydrocortisone or prednisone, they provide a baseline, but they're a crude instrument compared to a biological gland. They don't auto-adjust. If a patient with AI has a stressful meeting, or misses a bus and has to run, or fights off a cold, their body needs more cortisol than the pill provides. But the pill doesn't know that.
I want to dig into that crude instrument idea, because I think people assume if you take the pill, you're fixed. But the article from My Adrenal Life mentions something really interesting about adrenaline compensation, the idea that you can fake wellness for a little while. How does that work?
This is the mechanism that confuses so many families and employers. When cortisol is low, the body goes into emergency mode. It triggers the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. It floods the system with adrenaline, or epinephrine. Adrenaline can prop up your blood pressure and keep you alert. It's a backup generator.
So you look functional.
You look hyperfunctional. You might seem wired, energetic, even manic. A patient might push through a wedding or a long work shift on pure adrenaline. But adrenaline burns dirty. It's expensive energy. Once the event is over and the adrenaline wears off, there is no cortisol underneath to sustain the system. That's when the crash happens.
And that crash isn't just,
I need a nap, is it?
No, it's physiologic collapse. We're talking severe fatigue, brain fog, nausea, plummeting blood pressure. It can look like the flu, or it can look like a crisis. And the tricky part is the delay. You might run the marathon on Saturday morning and feel fine, but the crash hits you on Sunday afternoon. If you go to the doctor on Monday, they might not connect the two. They just see a patient who looks tired but has normal labs.
That delay seems like a recipe for gaslighting. Not intentional gaslighting necessarily, but structural gaslighting. The doctor sees the inputs, the meds, and the outputs, the labs, and assumes the machine is working. The patient is saying, the machine is screaming at me.
And the research backs up the patient. There have been studies, like those published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, showing that quality of life in Addison's patients is consistently lower than the general population, even when treatment is optimized. They report higher fatigue, lower vitality, more anxiety. The medical definition of optimized is usually just staying out of the hospital, not feeling good.
This brings up the variability aspect. You mentioned earlier that no two people experience this the same way. What are the variables? Why can one person with AI hold down a full-time job while another struggles to get out of bed?
It's a massive web of factors. First, metabolism. Some people metabolize the medication fast. They are fast metabolizers. They take a pill at 8 a.m. and by 11 a.m. it's gone. If their doctor has them on a standard twice-a-day dosing, they are spending hours every day with zero cortisol. Then you have absorption issues. Gut health matters. If you have celiac disease or just an upset stomach, you might not be absorbing your life-saving medication.
And then throw in the environment. Heat, right? I read that heat is a major trigger.
Heat causes vasodilation. Your blood vessels expand to cool you down. That drops blood pressure. Normal bodies pump out cortisol to tighten those vessels back up. AI bodies can't do that. So a hot summer day isn't just uncomfortable, it's a medical threat. Dehydration works the same way. So you have a patient who is fine in October but incapacitated in July, and the lab tests look exactly the same both months.
It feels like we are describing a management problem as much as a medical one. If the labs are unreliable markers of daily function, what replaces them? How does a patient bridge that gap?
Data, but a different kind of data. We have to move from snapshots to longitudinal tracking. This is something the My Adrenal Life founder, Rick Deisler, has really championed. If the doctor only sees the snapshot, the patient has to bring the movie. That means tracking symptoms, activity, and stressors over time.
What does that look like practically? Because I can see how that could become obsessive. You don't want to spend your whole life charting your life.
That is a risk, but the alternative is living in chaos. It doesn't have to be obsessive. It just needs to be consistent. You track the basics, blood pressure, heart rate, and then the subjective stuff, energy levels, brain fog. But the crucial part is linking it to context. I felt dizzy at 3 p.m. Okay, why? Oh, I scrubbed the bathroom floor at 1 p.m. When you see that pattern 3 times, you realize, okay, scrubbing floors drains my cortisol faster than I thought. I need to updose or pace myself.
Updosing, that's taking extra medication to mimic the body's stress response?
Right, we call it stress dosing. And it's an art form. It's very difficult to teach because the rules are fuzzy. Most doctors will tell you to double your dose for a fever. That's standard. But what about a job interview? What about a funeral? What about a really intense workout? Those are gray areas. The guidelines, like those from the Endocrine Society, are great for crisis prevention, but they are vague on quality of life management. Tracking helps the patient learn their own specific exchange rate. This activity costs me 5 milligrams of hydrocortisone.
I like that phrase, exchange rate. It monetizes the energy. It makes it tangible. But I have to play devil's advocate here. Isn't there a danger in patients self-medicating based on how they feel? We know cortisol is a steroid. Steroids feel good. They give you energy. Couldn't someone just start taking more because they want the boost and then run into issues with over-replacement, weight gain, osteoporosis, things like that?
That is the needle we are trying to thread, and it is a very sharp needle. You are absolutely right. Chronic overreplacement is dangerous. It leads to Cushing's syndrome symptoms, bone loss, diabetes, cardiovascular risk. That is why the doctors are so conservative with the labs. They are terrified of overprescribing, but the patient is terrified of underfunctioning. The tension exists because there is no real-time cortisol meter. Diabetics have continuous glucose monitors. They know their number every minute. AI patients are flying blind.
That's a profound tech gap. If we had a continuous cortisol monitor, this whole debate would probably vanish.
It would revolutionize the field overnight. Until then, we rely on symptoms. And to your point about abuse or overuse, yes, it's a risk. But in the AI community, the fear of running out of medication is usually stronger than the desire to take too much. Most patients I know hate the side effects of steroids. They don't want to take more. They just want to be able to stand up without fainting. They want to play with their kids without needing to sleep for 4 hours afterward.
So let's talk about the emotional and cognitive load of this. We've covered the biology, but imagine having to function as your own pancreas, essentially, or in this case, your own adrenal gland. You have to intellectually decide how much hormone you need to survive the next 3 hours. That has to be exhausting.
It is a massive cognitive burden. It's called decision fatigue. A healthy person doesn't think, I'm going to run for the bus, I better release some hormones. Their body just does it. An AI patient has to stop, calculate, check their pill supply, check their water intake, and then run. It turns every spontaneous moment into a logistical calculation. And when you are already low on cortisol, your brain fog is high. So you are forced to make complex medical decisions exactly when your brain is working the least effectively.
That explains the brain fog symptom mentioned in the article. It's not just being tired, it's executive dysfunction.
Exactly. Low cortisol affects the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. It affects memory and focus. Patients often describe it as trying to think through mud. So when a doctor asks, how have you been feeling since the last visit 6 months ago? Asking a patient with memory issues to recall specific physiologic trends is setting them up to fail. That's why the written record, the journal, the tracker, is an accessibility tool. It outsources the memory function to the paper.
The article mentions a specific tracker created by Rick Distler. It seems like a simple tool, paper and pen, but it's solving a complex problem.
It is the Adrenal Insufficiency Daily Tracker. It's a 90-day log. It structures the data points, symptoms, measurements, functional impact. It forces you to look at the correlations. And what's powerful is that you can take that book into the appointment, slide it across the desk, and say, look, here is the data. My labs were fine, but every Tuesday at 4 p.m., my blood pressure drops to 80/50. That is data a doctor can respect. It moves the conversation from I feel bad to here is clinical evidence of instability.
It changes the power dynamic in the exam room.
Completely. It makes the patient a partner in the investigation rather than just a passive recipient of care. And it helps the patient validate themselves. A lot of people with invisible illnesses struggle with imposter syndrome. Am I really sick? Maybe I'm just lazy. Maybe I'm just depressed. Seeing the patterns on paper proves that the physiology is real. It's not in your head, it's in your HPA axis.
Let's zoom out to the societal impact. We have these people walking around managing a life-threatening deficiency, often looking completely normal. But the article alludes to the isolation of it, trying to explain something invisible. How does this impact relationships or work?
It's incredibly isolating. If you have a broken leg, people hold the door for you. If you have AI, you might look great because you're flushed with adrenaline, but you're actually moments away from an adrenal crisis. Colleagues might see you work hard one day and then call out sick the next, and they assume you're flaky. Friends stop inviting you out because you cancel last minute when your energy tanks. It shrinks your world.
And the unpredictability seems to be the hardest part to explain. I can do this today, but I might not be able to do it tomorrow.
That's the spoon theory concept, which is popular in chronic illness circles, but for AI, it's even more literal. It's not just energy, it's chemical fuel. And explaining to a boss that you need a flexible schedule because your cortisol rhythm doesn't match the 9 to 5 is a hard sell. It requires a level of biological literacy that most of the general public just doesn't have.
We've talked about the problems, the snapshot labs, the delayed crashes, the social isolation. Is there hope here? Are we seeing a shift in how endocrinologists are approaching this? Or is the patient community still largely on its own?
There is a shift, but it's slow. The patient community, groups like My Adrenal Life and the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation, are doing the heavy lifting of education. But we are seeing more doctors acknowledge quality of life as a clinical endpoint. There's more research into circadian dosing, taking meds in a way that mimics the natural curve, maybe using extended release hydrocortisone or pumps that deliver cortisol subcutaneously like an insulin pump.
Pumps seem like the logical next step if we can't get the sensors yet.
Pumps are a game changer for some, but they are hard to get approved and technically complex. For the average patient right now, the hope lies in better self-management and better communication. It's about understanding that the goal isn't just survival, it's functionality, and that requires trusting the patient's narrative.
Trusting the narrative. That feels like the core message here. If a patient says they are struggling, the lab report shouldn't be used to silence them.
Exactly. The lab report is a tool, not a verdict. If the map says there's a road here, but you're standing in a swamp, trust your feet, not the map. Adrenal insufficiency is a condition of nuances. It changes hour to hour. The medical care needs to be flexible enough to accommodate that reality.
For anyone listening who might be dealing with this, maybe they have Addison's or secondary AI from steroids, what is the one thing they should start doing tomorrow to close that gap with their doctor?
Start writing it down. Don't rely on your memory in the exam room. Whether you use the My Adrenal Life tracker, a spreadsheet, or a napkin, document the crash. Document the context. I walked the dog, and then I had to lie down for an hour. Make the invisible visible. Your doctor can't treat what they can't see, so show them the patterns.
And for the friends and family listening,
Believe them. If they say they need to stop, they need to stop. It's not a preference. It's a physiological requirement. They are manually operating a system that you get to run on autopilot. Give them some grace for how hard that actually is.
It's a powerful reminder that biology's messy, and sometimes the most important diagnostic tool isn't a blood test, but a conversation. We've been deep diving into the reality of adrenal insufficiency, drawing on insights from the My Adrenal Life community. There is a lot more to unpack with this condition, but understanding that the numbers don't tell the whole story is the first step. If you know someone navigating the ups and downs of autoimmune disease or hormone replacement, send this episode their way. It might be the validation they've been looking for.